Adding and subtracting with a ruler and a piece of paper is so easy. You wonder why no one thought of it before. Well, actually they did.
Egyptian unit of measurement, the cubit.
In modern terms, the cubit was roughly 52.5 centimetres long, and it is subdivided into what was called 7 palms, the palm of your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And on the end we have 4 fingers there.
Perfect.
Perfect. And the way this would be used was marking out and measuring your way down the tomb. In fact, you can see the dots there where they've been marking out. See? As they came down.
It corresponds exactly.
Indeed.
And it's so usable. Look
So
at
simple.
That.
What he said is correct. There are 7 palms in a cubit and 4 fingers in a palm. But he said it the wrong way round, because they didn't take a cubit and divide it into 7 palms. Instead, they took 4 fingers. Now, why did they take 4, do you suppose? They took 4 fingers and said, that's 1 hand, or 1 palm. And we'll use 7 of them to make a cubit. So the cubit wasn't divided into 7 hands, 7 palms. 7 palms were assembled to make a cubit. They came up with the measure the other way round. Well, it's obvious why they use 4 fingers. So if you forget your thumb for a moment, you just hold out 4 fingers, that's a convenient width. And presumably the particular fingers they used was the master mathematician or master mason of the day that came up with the idea in the first place. And they decided to use 7 of them to make a cubit. Why 7? Why not 6 or 8? What's special about 7? So the Egyptians counted in 7s and 4s, whereas we count in 10s. We count in 10s because we got the idea from India, but the Egyptians counted in 7s and 4s. And this is very significant. There's something special about 7 and 4. Let's review what we found out so far. We know that the Egyptians, or at least some of them, worshipped the goddess Isis. Some Egyptologists have recently wondered whether Isis could have been the star Sirius, but we'll come to that in a later episode. Isis was the Egyptian goddess of fertility, the mother of the sun. She was a conflation of the earlier goddess Hathor and the Babylonian goddess Ishtar. Her face is round like the moon, and she cradles the sun in the horns of Hathor. The horns also have a special meaning, but let's just focus on one thing at a time, and I'll talk about the horns a bit later on. The moon was the mother goddess in the sky, the ruler of women, the goddess of childbirth. She was the mother of the sun god Horus, his protector, and our protector too. Every day she comes out at night to watch over us after Horus goes to bed at dusk. The Egyptian civilization wasn't the first culture on Earth, and many of its ideas are derived from earlier cultures, going all the way back to the hunter-gatherers of 37,000 years ago. Back in those days, people would have noticed that menstruation stops when pregnancy starts. They probably realized that men were somehow involved in the production of children, because usually a child looks like its mother's husband. But it wasn't until DNA sequencing was possible that we learned that, on average, 1 in 5 of us is not the child of the man we think is our father. So, if you're sitting in a room with 4 other people, you can look around and see which one of you is his. The hunter-gatherers of 37,000 years ago could see animals having sex and probably figured out the connection between sex and pregnancy and childbirth. But, and this is a key point, not every sex act produces a child, and not every marriage is blessed with children. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors were, like we all are, born with the ability to use their brains to figure things out. So they scratched their heads to figure out where babies come from, and to solve the puzzle of why one woman could produce a child, but not another. It was mysterious, magical, mystical. I think by now you can see where this is going. Modern humans, the species we call modern humans, began 200,000 years ago. 200,000 years ago, our ancestors had brains as big as ours. That's why we call them modern humans. The modern humans of 200,000 years ago were every bit as smart as we are today. They didn't know as much about the world as we do now, because what we know today is the sum total of everything people have learned and discovered over the whole course of that 200,000 years. Of course, not everyone today knows everything that anyone knows, nor even everything that all ancient people knew collectively. No one can possibly know everything. We only go to school for 10 or maybe 20 years, and that's not long enough to learn everything there is to be learned. There's an old joke about university graduates. When you get a bachelor's degree, you graduate knowing virtually nothing about anything, because 3 or 4 years study is only enough to barely scratch the surface. And after you get a PhD, you know everything about nothing. Because in the 3 years it takes to get a PhD, you only have time to study one tiny little thing, so small that compared to everything else there is to know, it's just about invisible. Your doctor hopefully knows a lot more than you do about medicine, but he or she cannot possibly know everything a doctor needs to know. That's why we have family doctor GPs who know a little about a lot of things, and medical specialists who know a lot about just one thing. Luckily for us all, the inventions of the printing press and movies and the World Wide Web, the collective knowledge of mankind is all written down somewhere. You just have to go out and look for it. School teachers know some things, and Google can find out a lot too. Some of the stuff on the web and some of the stuff in teachers' heads is just plain wrong, or even worse, deceitful tricks like advertising and propaganda that try to take advantage of you. But that's another whole story that I'll have to leave for the moment because I can't say everything at once. So let's go back 37,000 years ago and put ourselves in the shoes and in the minds of the people that were living in those times. Let's pretend that we know what they knew and can see what they saw. They, or we, can see that sometimes a woman would become pregnant and sometimes she wouldn't. How could this happen? You can see that when a woman becomes pregnant, her menstrual cycle stops and she doesn't get her usual monthly menstruation periods. After a while, she becomes as fat and pregnant as the Venus of Holy Fells. And later, a baby comes out from between her legs. A baby, like you once were. What made that happen? 37,000 years ago, there weren't any books or family doctors you could ask. You had to figure it out for yourself.
Holy cow! Holy cow! Holy cow!